Her name was Rachel. It was 1987. She had been married for 11 days. She was standing in her kitchen before dawn, before her husband woke, before the gray light had fully come through the window, before the day's work had officially begun. She was thinking about something she wanted to say. Something small. An opinion about a decision that had already been made without her. She already knew she wouldn't say it. Not because anyone had told her not to, but because she had grown up watching her mother not say it, and her mother before her. The women in her community did not need to be instructed in silence. They had been reading the instruction their entire lives. There was no rulebook handed to her at the wedding. There didn't need to be. The community had written it into her long before she ever said her vows. In Amish communities across America, the rules a wife followed were never written down. They didn't need to be. The community wrote them into her long before she ever said her vows. For a woman who joined the church, married young, and gave her life to the community, the Amish faith offered something in return: a precise map of exactly who she was allowed to be. Follow the map correctly, and she belonged. Step off it, and she risked losing everything she had ever known. Rule 10. The dress. There was no handbook. Every woman knew. The cape dress, the specific color palette approved by the district: dark blues, greens, burgundies, black. The prayer cap, white for married women, pinned precisely at the crown every morning without exception. Not fashion. Signal. A woman who dressed carelessly was not simply unkempt. She was communicating something to every person who saw her, about her faith, about her household, about her submission to God, and to the order that God had, according to the community, ordained. The cap told everyone who looked at her exactly where she stood in the hierarchy of her world. In the secular world of 1987, a woman could choose her clothes for comfort or preference. In Rachel's district, the choice had already been made. Her dress was not her own expression. It was the community's expression of her. The cap was not just fabric. It was a daily public statement that she had accepted her place. And everyone around her was reading it. Rule 9. Silence in the presence of male authority. In church, she sat on the women's side. She did not speak during services. In community meetings, decisions were made by men and announced to women. If she had a concern about a decision, about a neighbor, about something happening inside her own home, she offered it to her husband. He decided whether it was worth raising. He decided how. Women who spoke directly to the bishop, to the deacons, or to other men in positions of community authority were described with a single word: hochmut, pride. The community's most serious accusation. Pride was not simply arrogance. In Amish theology, hochmut was the root of all spiritual failure, the sin of placing your own will above God's. And God's will, in this community, was made known through male authority. A woman who bypassed that chain was not asserting herself. She was sinning. The word didn't need to be said aloud. The look was enough. Every woman knew what it meant. Every woman adjusted accordingly. Rule 8. The husband's word is the last word. She was not without a voice. She simply had to route it through the correct channels. Those channels led upward. They did not loop back. The Ordnung, the unwritten code of conduct that governed every Amish community, placed the husband as the spiritual head of the household. His decisions about money, about the farm, about the children's education, about her medical care, about where they lived and how they lived, were final. Questioning them was not a marital disagreement. It was a spiritual failing. This was not a fringe interpretation. It was the doctrinal center. Husbands who corrected their wives, firmly, physically, repeatedly, were not acting outside the system. They were acting exactly within it. The Ordnung did not draw clear lines between correction and abuse, because the framework that produced correction did not have a category for abuse. The husband's authority was, by definition, legitimate. What happened inside that authority was, by definition, a private matter. She had two voices above her and no court of appeal. That was not a flaw in the system. That was the system. Rule 7. The bishop's word is above that. Above the husband sat the bishop. He was not elected by the community in any democratic sense. He was chosen by lot, which the community understood as the hand of God. His interpretation of Scripture was not one perspective among several. It was the only interpretation available to her. Marital problems went to the bishop. Community disputes went to the bishop. Questions of faith, questions of conduct, questions about whether what was happening to her in her own home was acceptable, all of it went to the bishop. Women who sought outside counsel, a therapist, a social worker, a relative who had left the church, were already in violation before they made the call. They had bypassed the structure. They had implied that the structure was insufficient. That implication in itself was the offense. Women who brought outside authority into community matters were not seen as seeking help. They were seen as attacking the church. Rule 6. No unsupervised contact with the outside world. The rules so far could be explained as tradition. These next two could not. In most Amish districts of the 1980s, telephones were not permitted inside the home. Shared community phones, located in a shed or at a neighbor's property, were available for emergencies, but their use was known, noted, and often discussed. Letters to people outside the community were not private documents. They were read, sometimes answered before they were sent, sometimes not sent at all. There are documented accounts of husbands burning letters their wives had written to contacts outside the church, not as acts of rage, as acts of maintenance, keeping the boundary intact. A woman in crisis, a woman who needed to reach someone trained to recognize what was happening to her, had no private channel, no phone she could use without it being known, no letter she could guarantee would arrive, no way to ask for help without the act of asking becoming its own evidence against her. Rule 5. What happens inside stays inside. Community problems were community matters. That was not a philosophy. It was a rule with consequences. Involving outside authorities, the police, social services, a hospital, was a community violation before it was anything else. Before a woman could frame what had happened to her as a crime, she had to first accept that reporting it was itself a form of betrayal. She was not going to the police about her husband. She was going to the police about her church. Women who made that call were seen as having chosen the outside world over the community. The community responded accordingly, not with hostility necessarily, but with the quiet withdrawal that preceded formal shunning. The message was clear before any official action was taken. The practical result of Rules 6 and 5 together: no documentation, no external witness, no record. Whatever happened inside stayed inside because the system had been designed, with remarkable efficiency, to ensure that nothing inside could reach out. The most effective part of the system was the part that ensured no one outside it ever had to know what it contained. If you've ever wondered how a woman stays inside a system like this, subscribe before we continue. Because the next 4 rules are the ones that answer that question. And the comments on this video are already filling with people who grew up inside communities exactly like this one. Rule 4. Marital duty without refusal. The Ordnung did not address a wife's right to refuse her husband. It didn't need to. The assumption was already built into the structure. The theological framework that governed Amish marriage positioned a wife's body as available to her husband as part of the covenant of marriage. Refusal was not simply a personal boundary. It was a disruption of a spiritual arrangement. The community had no language for what refusal meant because the community had not built a space in which refusal was a concept that required language. What happened when a wife refused is documented in survivor testimony, not as aberration, as pattern. The framework that produced those testimonies is the story. Not the individual incidents, but the architecture that made those incidents invisible, that classified them as private marital matters, that routed any complaint back through the husband and then the bishop, that had already removed every external witness before anything occurred. A woman in Rachel's community who said no and faced consequences for it had no vocabulary that wasn't already her own spiritual failing. No authority to appeal to that hadn't already been defined as higher than her own perception. Rule 3. Medical care. Through the husband's permission. In many districts, a wife's access to medical care required her husband's agreement, not as a practical matter of transportation or cost, as a matter of authority. Childbirth. Midwife attended, at home, without pain management beyond what the community approved. Complications that would prompt a hospital transfer in the secular world were often managed, or not managed, within the community first. The decision of when an emergency became serious enough to involve outside medicine was made by the husband and, if necessary, the bishop. For psychological suffering, there was no medical category at all. Depression, anxiety, the accumulated weight of years inside a sealed system. These had no clinical vocabulary in the community's framework. They had a spiritual one. Women who showed signs of depression were told to pray more diligently, to submit more fully, to find their peace in the faith that the community's structure was God's design, and that suffering within it was not a sign that something was wrong, but that something in her was not yet fully surrendered. Her body was the place where the rules were most clearly written, and the place where she had the least say in what they said. Rule 2. Shunning is not metaphorical. She knew what leaving cost. She had watched it happen to someone else first. Meidung, the formal practice of shunning, meant that every person she had ever known would be required, by doctrine, to treat her as though she did not exist. Not as a social preference, as an obligation of faith. Her parents would not eat at the same table as her. Her sisters would not answer her letters. The women who had sat beside her at church every Sunday of her life, who had helped her give birth, who had brought food to her house when she was ill, all of them would look through her. This is the detail that requires the most careful attention. The community did not hate women who left. The community believed genuinely and without cruelty that shunning was the mechanism through which God called people back. It was an act of love, in their framework, a final attempt to save her. The psychological cost of that distinction is the most devastating thing in this video. She was not being punished by enemies. She was being erased by the people who loved her, and their love was the reason they would not stop. Rule 1. The children she would lose. In many American states through the 1980s and into the 1990s, Amish fathers in custody disputes had community infrastructure, church authority, and often local legal convention on their side. A woman who left the community and sought custody of her children entered a legal system that frequently had little framework for understanding what she was leaving, or why, or what returning the children to that community would mean for them. Some women knew this before they left. Some found out after. Some stayed for years past the point of endurance, past the point where anything in the marriage or the community felt survivable, because leaving meant making a choice between herself and her children. And the community knew that. The community had always known that. The final rule was the most effective one. It did not tell her she couldn't leave. It simply made sure she understood exactly what leaving would cost, and then left the door technically open. 10 rules, none of them in writing, all of them enforced. Rachel stood in her kitchen in 1987 and did not say the thing she was thinking. She would stand in that kitchen for 11 more years before she said it. When she finally left, she lost her parents, her sisters, and for 3 years, her children. She said later it was still the right decision. Nobody had told her it would cost that much. Nobody needed to. The rules had always included the price. It had just never been listed anywhere that she could point to and say, "Here, this is what it said. This is what I agreed to," because that was the final design of the system. The cost was real. The contract was invisible. And by the time she understood both, she had already paid. Did you grow up inside a community with rules like these? A closed church, a tight-knit tradition, a family system where certain things simply weren't said? Drop it in the comments, because the stories there are the ones this history doesn't keep records of. And if you think the hidden rules women lived under deserve to be told honestly, subscribe, because there are more of these women,